There are moments in time when heaven itself holds its breath, and July 2025 is one of those moments. This is not a coincidence that you're here right now, chosen one. This is not random that your spirit felt drawn to this message at this exact hour. Because what I'm about to reveal to you, they never wanted you to hear. For months now, something has been stirring in the spiritual realm. The enemy has been working overtime, hasn't he? You've felt it. The isolation, the attacks, the way doors seemed to slam shut just when breakthrough felt close, the way people who once celebrated you suddenly turned cold, the way your own family looked at you like you'd lost your mind when you started walking in your true calling. But what if I told you that every single attack, every betrayal, every moment they tried to break your spirit was actually confirmation that you carry something they're terrified of? What if everything they told you about power was a lie? See, the darkness has been watching you, chosen one. They've been studying your movements, your prayers, your tears in the middle of the night when you wondered if God had forgotten about you. They thought they had you figured out. They thought they could bury your destiny under shame, silence you with rejection, make you so small that you'd forget who you really are. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated the one who called you. July 2025 isn't just another month on the calendar. It's a divine reset, a cosmic shift where everything the enemy stole gets returned with interest, where every tear you cried in secret becomes a weapon of warfare, where every door they slammed in your face becomes an earthquake that shakes their very foundation. I want to take a moment to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and plant that seed of faith however the Spirit leads you. But here's what they don't want you to know, chosen one. While you've been hidden away, while you've been in what felt like spiritual exile, you weren't being punished. You were being prepared, forged, refined, made into something so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness that they're already trembling. Because in July 2025, the tables don't just turn, they completely flip. And what happened next made the darkness tremble. Don't skip what comes next, chosen one. Your breakthrough is encoded in every word. They thought silence meant surrender. They were wrong. You, chosen one, you know what it feels like to sit in that chair. The empty chair, the forgotten chair, the chair they saved for someone who mattered, until they decided you didn't. You remember the exact moment, don't you? When the invitations stopped coming, when your name got erased from conversations you used to lead, when people who once hung on your every word suddenly couldn't remember your phone number. They counted you out like yesterday's news, washed up, done, irrelevant. The whispers followed you everywhere. Remember when they used to be somebody? But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, what their finite minds couldn't comprehend, was that God was counting too, not counting you out, counting the days. Every slight, every dismissal, every time they looked right through you like you were invisible. Heaven was taking notes. Divine mathematics doesn't work like human math, chosen one. In God's economy, subtraction becomes multiplication, loss becomes leverage, and isolation becomes preparation. You were never behind. You were hidden, and hidden is not helpless, hidden is holy. See, while they were busy celebrating your absence, God was orchestrating your comeback. Every tear you cried in that empty room, every night you wondered if your purpose had expired, every morning you woke up feeling forgotten, that wasn't punishment, that was preparation. You weren't being buried, you were being planted. They thought your silence meant you had nothing left to say, but your silence was God teaching you a new language, the language of power that doesn't need permission, the vocabulary of strength that doesn't require applause. You learned to speak fluent victory in whispers, because lions don't roar to announce their presence. They roar to remind the world who's in charge. July 2025 wasn't God's backup plan. July was always the plan. While they were measuring your worth by what you lost, God was measuring their debt by what they stole. Divine justice doesn't operate on human schedules, but it always operates on time. And chosen one, your time wasn't late. It was right on schedule. You sat in that sacred grief, didn't you? That holy heartbreak that comes when people you trusted treat you like a stranger, when doors slam in faces that once opened kingdoms, When voices that once sought your wisdom suddenly act like you never existed. But that grief, that abandonment, that betrayal, it was refining you into something they couldn't handle. Because here's what they never understood. God's silence is not absence, it's calculation. While you were in exile, heaven was in session. While you felt forgotten, your name was being discussed in chambers they'll never access. Your vindication wasn't being delayed, it was being designed. They measured your impact by their limited vision. But God measured your worth by His limitless love. And in July 2025, the difference between human counting and divine mathematics becomes crystal clear. You weren't left behind, chosen one. You were positioned ahead. The chair they left empty was never meant to be filled forever. It was meant to be a launching pad. And the God who counts the stars and calls them by name never lost count of you. They thought hunger would weaken you. They were wrong. You know what I'm talking about, chosen one. The hunger that gnawed at your spirit when doors slammed shut. The emptiness in your stomach when opportunities dried up. The way they cut off your resources, your connections, your very lifeline, thinking you'd come crawling back, begging for scraps from their table. But here's what they didn't understand about the anatomy of a seed. A seed doesn't need applause to grow. It doesn't need spotlight to take root. All it needs is darkness, pressure, and time. And they gave you all three in abundance. While they were feasting on validation, gorging themselves on temporary glory, you were learning something far more dangerous. You were learning how to survive on nothing but divine breath. How to thrive when the world said you had no right to exist. How to find water in the desert of their rejection. They tried to bury you in shame, but the soil didn't take your life, it took your instructions. Every rejection letter became fertilizer. Every closed door became compost. Every whisper behind your back became the very nutrients that fed your underground growth. They thought they were ending your story, but they were actually writing the prologue to your resurrection. You see, chosen one, there's a difference between dying and germinating. Death is final. Germination is preparation. And while they celebrated your apparent demise, you were quietly breaking open in the darkness, sending roots so deep into divine purpose that no earthly storm could ever uproot you again. The hunger they tried to use as a weapon became your greatest teacher. It taught you that you don't need their approval to breathe. You don't need their permission to dream. You don't need their validation to know who you are. The hunger stripped away every false dependency until all that remained was you and the one who called you. And oh, how that terrified them. Because a person who can survive on nothing but God's breath is the most dangerous force in any room. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need what you're selling. You can't control someone who's learned to feast on divine favor. You can't starve someone who's discovered that heaven never runs out of resources. They watched you in that season, expecting you to break, to beg, to compromise your calling for a morsel of their acceptance. But instead, you did something that shook them to their core. You smiled. Not the desperate smile of someone trying to convince others they're fine. The knowing smile of someone who's discovered a secret supply line straight from the throne room of God. You didn't just survive their famine, chosen one. You learned to create abundance from nothing. You learned to find streams in the wasteland. You learned that when man's provision ends, God's provision begins. And that revelation made you absolutely untouchable. The seed they tried to bury is about to crack through the surface. And when it does, they're going to realize their greatest mistake. They didn't plant you to destroy you. They planted you to multiply you. The harvest is coming, chosen one, and it's going to be bigger than they ever imagined. They looked at your bloodline and saw a mistake, but heaven looked at your bloodline and saw a masterpiece waiting to happen. You know the feeling, don't you? Being the one who didn't fit, the one who asked too many questions at family dinners, the one who refused to smile when everyone else was pretending everything was fine. They called you difficult, rebellious, too sensitive, the black sheep who couldn't just go along to get along. But what they never understood was that you weren't the problem in your family tree. You were the solution heaven had been waiting for. See, chosen one, there's something they don't teach you about spiritual inheritance. It doesn't flow to the strongest, it flows to the one brave enough to break what's already broken. Every family has patterns, cycles of dysfunction, wrapped in tradition, generational curses disguised, as that's just how we are. And for decades, maybe even centuries, everyone in your bloodline just accepted it. The anger, the silence, the settling, the fear of speaking truth, the way love got twisted into control and loyalty got confused with enabling. Generation after generation, they passed down the same spiritual poison and called it heritage. Until you. You were never meant to continue the pattern, chosen one. You were sent to shatter it. That's why you felt so different growing up. Why you couldn't stomach the family dynamics that everyone else seemed comfortable with. Why you were the one who walked away when others stayed silent. Why you were the one who said enough when everyone else said that's just how they are. They thought you were weak because you felt too much, but heaven knew you were strong enough to feel everything and still choose differently. You see, spiritual inheritance doesn't skip the rejected, it begins with them. Every prophet, every breakthrough, every divine reset starts with the one who was willing to stand alone, the one who refused to bow to broken systems just because they'd been broken for a long time. You weren't cursed, you were surrounded by cowards, and heaven gave you the sword. That sword was your sensitivity, your refusal to accept dysfunction as normal, your ability to see through the lies that everyone else called love, your courage to walk away from approval when it came at the cost of your soul. They mocked your boundaries, they punished your honesty, they tried to guilt you back into the dysfunction by calling you ungrateful, unforgiving, prideful. But all they were really saying was, how dare you refuse to carry what we've been too weak to put down. But July 2025 changes everything, because the chainbreaker season isn't just about breaking free, it's about breaking through. Every curse that stopped at your grandparents' generation, every blessing that got blocked by fear and pride, every promise of God that got buried under tradition, it all comes flooding back to you. Not because you earned it, because you endured it. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The rejection wasn't abandonment, it was appointment. God needed you away from the toxic patterns long enough to remember who you really are. Away from the voices that told you to shrink, long enough to hear the voice that calls you chosen. You didn't break the chain with violence, you broke it with truth. You didn't fight the darkness, you became too bright for it to survive. And now, July 2025. The spiritual inheritance that was always meant for you finally finds its way home. The weak link, that was never you, chosen one. You were always the chain breaker, they just couldn't see the sword in your hand. They thought the silence meant surrender. They were wrong. While they were busy making noise, plotting your downfall, spreading their poison through whispered conversations and backroom betrayals, you were somewhere else entirely. You were on your knees. Not in defeat, chosen one, but in the most dangerous position known to heaven and hell alike. You were in communion with the Almighty. They celebrated too early, didn't they? They thought when you stopped defending yourself, when you stopped explaining, when you stopped trying to prove your worth to people who had already made up their minds, that they had won. They mistook your stillness for weakness, your quiet for quitting, your withdrawal for defeat. But God was watching those midnight hours. He saw you when the tears fell like rain on your pillow. He heard every broken prayer, every whispered plea, every moment you asked him if you were crazy for believing you were called for something greater. He counted every tear that fell in the darkness when the world slept, unaware that they were in the presence of someone being forged in the furnace of affliction. You didn't curse your enemies, you wept for them. You didn't plot revenge, you prayed for breakthrough. You didn't scheme and manipulate, you surrendered and trusted. And that, chosen one, is where your power was being born. Not in the noise of retaliation, but in the sacred silence of submission to something higher than your pain. The strength wasn't in your noise, it was in your restraint. While they were busy destroying your reputation, you were building your character. While they were tearing down your name, you were lifting up your prayers. While they were spreading lies about who you were discovering who you really are in the secret place with the one who knew you before you drew your first breath. They thought they were breaking you. But brokenness in the hands of the divine isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. Every crack they created became a place for his light to shine through. Every wound they inflicted became a doorway for his healing to flow. Every betrayal they orchestrated became another brick in the foundation of your unshakable faith. You prayed when you had no words left. You worshipped when you had no strength left. You believed when you had no evidence left. And in those moments, chosen one, when everything human in you wanted to give up, something supernatural was being activated. A patience that couldn't be manufactured. A peace that couldn't be explained. A power that couldn't be contained. Power doesn't come from proving, it comes from posture. The posture of humility when pride would have felt better. The posture of forgiveness when bitterness would have felt justified. The posture of trust when doubt would have felt safer. You chose the harder path, the higher way, the sacred response. And heaven took note. They prayed you'd break under the pressure. You prayed in the pressure. And there's a difference that only eternity will fully reveal. your silence wasn't empty. It was full of faith, full of hope, full of a knowing that goes deeper than understanding. July 2025 isn't just about your vindication, chosen one. It's about the revelation of what was being built in you during those silent years. What they thought was your ending was actually your beginning. The real power was never in the noise you could make. It was in the stillness you could keep. They thought your pain was entertainment. Every sarcastic comment, every eye roll, every moment they dismissed your calling as delusion. They gathered around like spectators at a circus, pointing and whispering, convinced your suffering was proof they were right about you all along. But chosen one, what they didn't know is that mockery has an echo. And that echo traveled straight to the throne room of God. You see, there's something the enemy never calculated. When darkness laughs at light, heaven doesn't just hear it. Heaven records it. Every sneer that crossed their lips, every joke they made at your expense, every time they celebrated your setbacks. It's all been documented in the divine ledger. Not for revenge, beloved, but for response. Because God does not forget the sound of dishonor. Remember when they laughed the loudest? When your marriage fell apart and they whispered it was because you were too spiritual? When your business failed and they said it was God's judgment? When your children turned away and they claimed it proved you were a false prophet in your own home? Their laughter echoed through the halls of their hearts, but it also echoed through the corridors of heaven. And every single note was recorded by angels who don't sleep, don't forget, and don't forgive dishonor against the chosen. But here's what breaks my heart, chosen one. While they were laughing, you were learning. While they were mocking, you were maturing. While they were celebrating your collapse, you were being reconstructed from the inside out. They thought they were watching your destruction, but heaven was orchestrating your development. Every tear that fell from your eyes was collected in the bottles of eternity. Every prayer you whispered in the darkness was heard by the one who never slumbers. The divine courtroom has been in session this entire time. Evidence has been presented. Testimonies have been recorded. The defense has rested. And now, in July 2025, the verdict is about to be read. Not by earthly judges who can be bought or influenced, but by the Supreme Court of Heaven where justice is perfect and mercy is infinite. They mocked your prophetic words, didn't they? Called you crazy when you said God was preparing something unprecedented. Laughed when you declared that your wilderness season was actually your preparation season. But prophets have always been mocked before they were vindicated. Noah was laughed at until it started raining. Joseph was ridiculed until the famine came. David was dismissed until he faced Goliath. And you, precious chosen one, have been scorned until July 2025. Their jokes echoed, but heaven recorded every line. And now, the table is being set, not for a meal of revenge, but for a feast of restoration. The very people who thought your story was over are about to discover they were only reading the prologue, because when heaven responds to mockery, it doesn't whisper, it thunders. It doesn't apologize, it demonstrates. It doesn't explain, it reveals. July isn't coming to embarrass your mockers, chosen one. It's coming to establish your authority. The same voices that laughed at your calling will fall silent when they see your commissioning. The same hands that pointed in ridicule will fold in recognition. The same hearts that celebrated your pain will be pierced by your promotion. Because when heaven listens to laughter aimed at the chosen, it prepares an answer that makes the earth tremble and the darkness flee. Your vindication is written in eternal ink, sealed with divine authority, and scheduled for delivery in July 2025. They thought the trauma would shatter you into 1,000 pieces. They believed the betrayal would leave you hollow, empty, broken beyond repair. But what they didn't understand, chosen one, is that some souls aren't meant to be victims. Some souls are meant to be weapons. You didn't just survive the fire, you became the furnace. Let me tell you what really happened in those dark nights when you thought God had abandoned you. While you were crying out in agony, wondering why the pain wouldn't stop, something ancient was awakening in your DNA. Every tear you shed wasn't just salt water hitting the ground. It was liquid gold being refined in the crucible of your calling. Every betrayal wasn't just another wound. It was another layer of spiritual armor being forged in the flames of your destiny. You see, the enemy made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he could break you with the same fire that breaks ordinary people. But you were never ordinary, were you? You were chosen before the foundation of the world. And chosen ones don't break in fire, they become fire. Hell can't burn what's already been refined. They watched you walk through seasons that would have destroyed lesser souls. They saw you endure betrayals that would have turned others bitter. They witnessed you face rejection that would have silenced weaker voices. and they kept waiting for you to fall apart, kept waiting for you to give up, kept waiting for you to become like them, wounded, angry, and spiritually powerless. But you didn't fall. You rose. You didn't run. You stood. You didn't flinch. You smiled. And that's when they realized what they were really dealing with. You weren't just another believer going through hard times. You were a furnace disguised as a person, a walking, breathing, spiritual weapon that hell itself couldn't contain. Every attack they launched against you only made you hotter. Every scheme they devised only increased your spiritual temperature. Your presence became untouchable. Watch this, chosen one. When you walk into a room now, the spiritual atmosphere shifts. Not because you're trying to be intimidating, but because you carry the residue of divine fire. The demons that once whispered lies in your ear now tremble at the sound of your voice. The spirits that used to torment your mind now flee before you even enter the building. You didn't just overcome darkness. You became the light that darkness cannot comprehend. You know what happened, don't you? While they were busy trying to destroy you, heaven was busy transforming you. Every wound became a window for glory to shine through. Every scar became a sacred testimony. Every broken place became a breakthrough point. You weren't being punished. You were being processed. Not for destruction, but for dominion. They thought fear would break you. It backfired. Now you move through this world with a fearlessness that unnerves your enemies, not because you're reckless, but because you've already been through the worst they could throw at you. You've been tested in fires that would melt steel, and you came out like refined gold. What can mere humans do to someone who's already been through hell's best attempts and emerged victorious? You didn't just come out of the furnace, chosen one. You became the fire they can't contain. And that terrifies them, because they know that a soul who's been refined in divine fire doesn't just walk in victory. They create it wherever they go. They gathered in circles, chosen one, whispering your name in the darkness, thinking they could penetrate what heaven had already protected. You felt it, didn't you? The weight in the air during those midnight hours when sleep wouldn't come, the sudden draining of your energy for no reason, the way conversations turned cold when you walked into rooms, the mysterious illnesses that doctors couldn't explain, the technology that glitched around you, the relationships that suddenly soured without warning. But here's what they never told you about spiritual warfare. Here's what the enemy discovered too late. They summoned every demon, but still couldn't read your assignment because it was written in glory. See, before you were even born, before your first breath touched earthly air, there was a scroll written in the throne room of heaven. Your name wasn't just written in the book of life, chosen one. Your entire destiny was encrypted in divine language that no witch, no warlock, no principality could ever decode. They tried. Lord knows they tried. They cast spells over your finances, thinking they could block your provision. But every dollar they tried to steal came back multiplied because the scroll said, blessed. They sent confusion into your relationships, hoping to isolate you. But every person who walked away only made room for the ones heaven had already assigned to your story. They whispered curses over your health, your mind, your peace. But the scroll was sealed with blood that predates their very existence. Blood that makes demons tremble. Blood that renders every curse null and void before it even leaves their lips. You want to know why you're still standing when others with less attacks have fallen? You want to know why your light never dimmed despite years of them trying to snuff it out? No curse can decode what God encrypted. While they were burning candles and chanting incantations, heaven was laughing, not at you, chosen one, but at their futile attempts to touch what was already sealed. Every hex they threw bounced back to them. Every evil eye they cast turned into their own blindness. Every trap they set became their own snare. They could study you, but they couldn't read you. They could attack you, but they couldn't access you, because your true identity was written in a language they were never taught. Your purpose was sealed with a seal they could never break. The scroll was never handed to the enemy. It was kept in the archives of heaven, guarded by angels who don't sleep, protected by a God who doesn't forget his promises. That's why every weapon formed against you has failed. That's why every door they tried to close has opened. That's why every lie they spread about you eventually exposed their own darkness. The spell failed because the scroll was sealed. And in July 2025, chosen one, that seal breaks open not to release curses, but to release the fullness of what was always written about you. They never had access to your real story. They were fighting shadows while your destiny was hidden in light. The witchcraft failed. The manipulation crumbled. The spells dissolved. Because some things are simply too holy to be touched by human hands. The table didn't appear in July. It was being carved in every silent night. You see, chosen one, they thought the table would be set by politics, by connections, by who you knew in high places. They thought favor came from favors. They thought blessing came from bargaining. But God's table is set with tears. It's carved with obedience. It's polished with the kind of faith that says yes when everything looks like no. July 2025 isn't when your breakthrough begins. July is when your breakthrough becomes undeniable. There's a difference. What's happening in July has been building in the courts of heaven for months, for years, through every midnight prayer they never heard, every act of kindness they never saw, every moment you chose love when hatred would have felt justified. The reward is never random, beloved. It matches the weight of obedience. While they were building their kingdoms on sand, you were building yours on something they couldn't see. Every time you turned the other cheek, you weren't being weak. You were laying a foundation stone. Every time you blessed those who cursed you, you weren't being naive. You were making a deposit in the bank of heaven. Every time you stayed silent when you could have destroyed them with your words, you weren't being powerless. You were letting God be your defense attorney. And now the verdict is in. You remember those nights, don't you? When you cried so hard you thought your chest would cave in, when the rejection felt like it would suffocate you, when you asked God if He had forgotten your address, forgotten your name, forgotten the promises He whispered to you in the beginning. You thought those tears were wasted. You thought that pain was pointless. But heaven doesn't waste water. Every tear you cried in secret became rain for your harvest. Every sob in the darkness became the foundation for your table. They're going to watch in July as doors swing open that they spent years trying to keep locked. They're going to witness favor flooding into your life from directions they never controlled. And the beautiful irony, chosen one, is that your table will be set in their presence, but not for their humiliation. It will be set for their education. Because the table God sets for you isn't just about blessing you. It's about showing them what real power looks like. It's about demonstrating that the meek really do inherit the earth, that the last really do become first, that every spiritual law they mocked is more real than gravity. You won't gloat. You won't need to. Your peace will be your testimony. Your grace will be your victory speech. Your very presence at that table will preach a sermon more powerful than any words could ever speak. The table was never about you finally getting what you deserved. The table is about God showing the world what happens when somebody trusts Him in the dark, loves Him in the storm, serves Him in the silence. Conclusion. Chosen one, if you've stayed with me through this entire message, that itself is proof that something divine is stirring in your spirit. You didn't stumble upon this video by accident. You were led here, drawn here, called here for such a time as this. Let me remind you of the most important truths we've uncovered today. Your tears were never wasted. They were seeds planted in the soil of heaven's promise. Your silence was never weakness. It was the sacred pause before God's thunderous response. Your isolation was never abandonment. It was preparation for a purpose so significant that it required you to be refined in the secret place. The table that turns in July 2025 was built in every moment. You chose faith over fear, love over bitterness, hope over despair. Every act of obedience, every whispered prayer, every time you blessed those who cursed you, all of it was laying the foundation for what's coming. But I need you to understand something deeper, beloved. You are not walking this journey alone. God hasn't just been watching your struggle, He's been orchestrating your victory. Even right now, as you listen to these words, He is moving pieces on the chessboard of your life that you cannot see. The same God who promised to prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies is the same God who keeps His word across generations. And right here, in this community of believers, you have brothers and sisters who understand your pain, who have walked through their own valleys, who know what it means to wait on God's timing. We are not just viewers and content creators. We are a family united by the same hope, the same calling, the same God who turns tables and transforms lives. I want to ask you a question that only you and God can answer. What if everything you've endured was preparing you not just for your own breakthrough, but to be a lifeline for someone else who's walking through what you've already survived? Now, let me pray over you with the authority of someone who has witnessed God's faithfulness for 5 decades. Heavenly Father, I place my hand on the shoulder of every person listening to this message. Right now, in this moment, I ask you to let them feel your presence so powerfully that doubt has no choice but to flee. Lord, you see the battles they've fought in secret, the tears they've cried in the darkness, the moments they've wanted to give up but chose to keep going because something inside them whispered not yet. God, I pray for divine acceleration in their lives. Let July 2025 be the month when everything shifts, when doors that have been locked for years suddenly swing open, when favor floods their lives from unexpected directions. Vindicate them, Lord. Restore what was stolen. Multiply what was sacrificed. Turn their mourning into dancing and their ashes into beauty. I speak peace over their minds tonight, peace over their hearts, peace over their families. I declare that every weapon formed against them will not prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment will be condemned. Let their enemies become their footstool and their trials become their testimony. Give them strength for the journey ahead, wisdom for the decisions they must make, and an unshakable confidence that you are working all things together for their good. Let them sleep in peace tonight, knowing that you neither slumber nor sleep, and that you are fighting battles on their behalf even while they rest. In the mighty name of Jesus, I seal this prayer and declare it done. Amen. Before you go, I want you to know something. Your voice matters in this community. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of this message spoke to your heart. Share your prayer request. We believe in the power of agreement in prayer. If you've seen God move in your life recently, testify about it. Your breakthrough might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep holding on. And if this message has blessed you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not forgotten, not forsaken, and definitely not finished. There are people in your life right now who need to hear that their table is being prepared, their time is coming, and their God has not forgotten his promises. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey today. Thank you for trusting me with your time, your attention, and your heart. If this ministry has been a blessing to your life, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and be part of a community that believes in miracles, walks in faith, and supports one another through every season. Remember, Chosen One, your story isn't over. Your best chapters are still being written. And come July 2025, when that table turns, the whole world will know that you serve a God who keeps his promises. Until we meet again, walk in the confidence of who you are and whose you are. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. God bless you, and keep shining your light in the darkness. The world needs exactly what you carry.